Welcome to Kam Wah Chung State Heritage Site here in John Day, Oregon. I'm Don. I'm the museum curator here for Oregon State Parks. Today we're going to be going on a tour of the historic Kam Wah Chung building in 360 video. So feel free to spin your video around, take a look top, down, all around, from side to side to fully experience the Kam Wah Chung tour. So before I head inside the building here, I'd like to go over a brief history timeline about the history of Kam Wah Chung. So in 1862, that's when gold was discovered in Canyon City, just south of us here. And like typical mining communities of the West, they had their own Chinatown there as well. When gold was discovered, different miners on their way from California and Nevada to Idaho and Montana camped on Canyon Creek, accidentally found gold, formed a town. Well, right in behind them was the Chinese laborers and miners. Basically did the same thing. Camped on the creek, found gold, formed a Chinatown. In 1865, that is when this building here was built. Everyone assumes it's built by the Chinese. However, new information we got a few years ago, it's been confirmed it's built by the Dawes Military Road Company as part of Congress's legislation to improve trade and supply routes to the West Coast. So this is actually built as a little supply depot for them and a stage stop. In 1871, some Chinese laborers actually bought it, turned it into a general store, and named it Kam Wah Chung Company. And that's the original sign up there on the building. In 1885, a couple things happened that year. First off, the Chinatown that was in Canyon City mysteriously burnt down, and the Chinese were not allowed to rebuild there. Instead, they were forced to come over here to John Day and build in this location. To give you an idea how large it was, the southern extent was right over there by the green fence. The western boundary was into the city park, right behind the building here. Eastern boundary is right about where that road is behind the trees there behind you. And then the northern extent was right about where those houses are right now. Right about where those bike racks here are near the blue building is where the Chinese temple used to be. So what we are standing in right now was the main street of Chinatown. That meant in 1885 that there was about 2,000 Chinese immigrants living here, which made it the third largest Chinatown in the U.S., only after San Francisco and then Seattle or Portland, depending which time of year you look at. Also in 1885, that's when we think Wang and Ng Dake actually first met. Wang, the businessman, Dake the doctor. They decided to go into business together and partner up, so they bought Kam Wah Chung Company in 1887. That's really when this story here begins. By 1910, most of the Chinese population had left. All the labor jobs in ranching, railroad, and mining were pretty much gone, so a lot of the Chinese went back to Portland, or they went back to China. In the 1930s, most of Chinatown itself was also gone. Fire came through, burnt down a few of the structures, including the Chinese temple, and then the John Day dredge looking for gold on the river pretty much buried the rest of Chinatown underneath all the tailing piles. In 1948, Dake fell, broke his hip, had to be taken apart and to be mended. He thought he'd be back in a few weeks, so he just locked the doors, locked the windows, and he never returned. So the building sat vacant and unopened for the next 20 plus years until the late 1960s. At that point, the city of John Day was going to develop the area and tear the building down, but one of the city council members said, well, maybe before we do that, we should see what's inside the building first. So he unlocked the doors, looked in, came back, and said, we're going to make this a museum. So that's where our story now begins. So at this point, we'll head inside the building here. Okay, I think we're ready to head on inside the building now. If you follow me, we'll begin our tour inside the building. As we're going in, notice this little bullet hole right here on the doorway. So we are now entering the Kam Wah Chung building. As you can see, it's pretty dark in here. So let me go ahead and get the lights turned on. So this is pretty much what the building looked like when they first opened up in the 1960s. If you notice over here, there is a bullet hole. A lot of people question the intelligence of the Chinese, because as most people know, tin is not necessarily the best material to stop bullets. What their main concern was people throwing flammable objects to burn their buildings down. So they put tin in the doors and windows to help prevent that. In this case, it's kerosene cans they flattened out, put on here. Over here, you notice that they also add steel accordion door for add protection here as well. Because when you go ahead and close the door, you can see where the bullet passes through anyway. So this is pretty much what the building looked like when they first opened up in the 1960s. But the only thing that really changed is that we removed our crates and boxes from the main floors here, so we can open up for folks to walk through. But as you can see, everything is still in its place as it was in 1960 when they first opened up the building, including the fruit over here in the corner. The main room that you're standing in right now had two purposes. During the day, this was Doc K's waiting room. What he would have you do is come and sit on these different stools and chairs around the room, have you sit there. He'd call you over into this big red chair. That chair is where he'd have you sit, and he would feel your pulse. You put your arm on that little stool. You used to have a little pillow right there. He'd feel your pulse, called pulsology. He was able to distinguish 24 different pulses, and then he would ask you a couple questions, see what was ailing you. Here is the apothecary. This is where Doc K would select some of the 500 different ingredients he had back here, depending on what was ailing you for your treatment. They would include things such as animal extracts, herbs, and minerals. One of the best known ones is, if you can see right here, are bear paws. There's some deer legs. On the back wall, there in the tall bottles are snakes in there for his snake alcohol. So we will come back in here for a second. And one of the benefits of this 360 video is that we're actually able to come back here into the apothecary itself and take a look more closely at these different ingredients. Feel free to look around. Here in front are different cans, herbs, and boxes. These different tins and boxes are still filled with all these different ingredients that he used. Here are the rattlesnakes in the snake that he used in his snake alcohol in these tall jars here. All of these big brown paper bags right here are still sealed with all these different ingredients that he used. Most of it shipped from Hong Kong and from via San Francisco. Over here behind is this bench, and this has other ingredients on there. You can still see the little prescription bottles, little Chinese medicine bottles that he used as well. This is a mortar and pestle that he used to grind up some of the ingredients, along with the coffee grinder over there. And he would do this, and he would provide a prescription for you, either using one of the red ones up here on the wall, or there is some white cards here that he used for prescription labels as well. He would fix these up, and the convention is that it smelled bad and tasted even worse. So, but he was able to treat a variety of different ailments. He was very successful with it. His specialty was influenza and blood poisoning, but he was able to treat a variety of other ailments here as well. So at this point, we'll head back out into the main room. Over in this corner is Doc K's bedroom. This is where he spent the next 60 years of his life, in this little room right here. We'll bring up the camera up a little closer so you can see inside. Right now, you are actually standing inside of Doc K's room right here. As you can see, it's sparsely decorated, not a lot going on. A couple unique things to point out. If you look right there on his little end stand, there's a variety of items on there, including alarm clocks, straight razors, soap, a little incense for personal ceremonies that they would do at night, and also that meat cleaver. Meat cleaver has a little story behind it, and we'll get to that here in just a moment. And if you look underneath his bed, there is a trunk. In that trunk was found $23,000 worth of on-cash checks, which in today's money, that would be close to $320,000 in today's money. And a lot of people were questioning the reason why Doc K never cashed checks. But one of the main reasons is that you have to keep in mind the time frame. Most of the checks were taken during the 1920s and early 1930s. And so what was happening during that time period? The Depression. And so what he would do, he would accept the check, but he told friends around town that the reason he didn't cash them is because he did not need the money, but they did. So he just never cashed the checks. Going back to that meat cleaver on the stand, because of the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, Chinese were not allowed to own firearms, so they used cleavers. They used it for everything every day. One of the questions that we ask visitors when they come through is, what do they think about Dr. K using it? Did he use it? Did he not? And so we always open it up for debate. Well, in 2006, we actually had oral histories done for local town folks about their knowledge of Dr. K and Langan. One of the gentlemen that was interviewed relayed the story. When he was much younger, he and some friends were very curious about what was inside this building. This is at the time Dr. K lived here by himself. So one night, they decided to break into the building. And this is at the time Dr. K lived here by himself. And the kids were about 10, 12 years old at that time. They broke in through the front door, which we'll come back out here for. So one night they broke in through the building through the front door, took a couple of steps in, and next thing they knew, the meat cleaver whizzed by their heads, hit the wall, and they bolted out. And they told everyone in town, don't go into Doc K's building because they'll throw the meat cleaver at them. Well, it kind of goes along with another part of the story. There's 3 points with this. First off, we have an account of him using it for defense. Second point is, when he was throwing the meat cleaver, he did not know where he was throwing it because he was actually blind. Doc K had very poor eyesight when he arrived here to John Day, and by 1940 he was almost completely blind, about 85% vision loss. Point: when you have the younger generation telling stories about meat cleavers being thrown at them, and then the older generation that knew Langan and Doc K and respected them for being members of the community, goes a long ways why this building was never vandalized during that 20-year period. We do know a couple times it got broken into by local kids looking for fireworks, but even they admitted they thought they were hearing noises. One person thought they heard a voice, and that's all it took. They just left everything alone when they vacated the building. One other thing to know with Doc K is that a couple, 3 years ago, we actually had some special visitors come through. It was a Chinese delegation consisting of 5 professors in universities in Hong Kong, Beijing, and Taiwan. They specialize in Chinese medicine, and they've been working on a project for the last several years, going to different sites around the world, gathering information about Chinese medicine. Because during their Cultural Revolution, all that information got lost and destroyed. So they've been tasked to try to piece it all back together. Well, basically, we were the last one on the list. When they came over, they spent only a couple hours in the apothecary, a couple hours over in our archives. In our archives, we have about 20,000 documents in our collection, most of it still written in Cantonese Chinese, which is the writing that you see around you here. When they got done, they came back to us and said, we just want to let you know, of all the places that we've been to around the world, you have the largest intact collection of Chinese medicine in the world at this point. And they said, when they looked through the ingredients in here, they were finding things that are still viable, could be used today. There's ingredients in here that are even extinct in the wild, such as the plant that produces quinine for malaria. And that's all this is right here, pretty much untouched. Of the 500 different ingredients that we have back there, we got about 263 identified so far. And when they tied that into our archives, because we have all of Doc K's medical formulas, patient records, and prescription records, when they tied it all together, they were so amazed that they said, this is enough information here that will change our knowledge of the medical world. So they're very excited about looking at that. They plan on coming back here at some point in the future to do more research. We are also trying to gather more research on our own, going through the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine in Portland. They're helping translate some of our medical ingredients and formulas. And so we have a project going on with that. There's potential here for a lot of research. We are only one of 3 places in the world that have an intact collection of both ingredients and documents, and we are definitely the largest in North America. The other places are placed in New Zealand and then in London. So the main room that you're staying in right now had 2 purposes. The second purpose was Lung On. He would come on at night after Doc K was done with his doctoring of his patients. He would come out, and he was the China boss. He was able to speak and write English and Chinese very well. He would help find work for all the new Chinese immigrants when they came into town, help find lodging, help write letters home, help with legal matters. He would tell fortunes. So he was doing all these different activities when the Chinese was here to help them along. He would also pull out this red table here at night. When he did that, that meant his casino was open for business. They would play cards, fantan, dominoes, mahjong, fantan, a variety of different games that they would play. And this little box right here was what we referred to as the donation box. That meant that what we think is all the proceeds from his gambling was kept in that box, kind of like a little cash box. And he would do all these different activities, and this really was a social cultural center of not only the John Day community here, but also region-wide. We have records going towards Boise and Idaho and Portland. And so this really was the cultural religious center in this region, was Kam Wah Chung. And we're just starting to get into a lot of that right now through all our research. This is Lung On's general store. With the 360 viewing, we were able to actually step back here where most people are not allowed into the general store, so you can get a better close-up view of what's in here. So this is the store that Lung On ran, but it was not the only thing that he ran. He had other businesses throughout Oregon and Washington that he also was either co-owner of, or he owned a part ownership of them. But this general store here is really what started him out on his business ventures. As you can see, there's a lot of different varieties of in here. When the Chinese community was here, he would sell a lot more Chinese goods, such as these opium plate bowls, these little scales. You can see brown jugs over there. That's behind you if you're looking toward the back. And he would sell a lot of these other Chinese ingredients. After the Chinese left, he started selling a lot more Western goods, because at that point the Chinese had a decision to make. By 1900, are they going to stick around and try to find other work? Or are they going to go back home? Are they going to go back to China, back to Portland? Well, Lung On and Doc K decided to stay here, and they actually flourished based on that decision. Lung On would actually start selling a lot more Western goods, and they would sell things that you can still find today, such as your Quaker Oats up there in the corner, MJB coffee, tree tea. There's also in the little blue tins aspirin. Over here on this side is a lot more tobacco products, such as Prince Albert. You have baking soda. They also sell lots of alcohol, as you can see over here in the back corner. And that was their 2 best sellers, obviously, was tobacco and alcohol. Here on the back wall is another shrine. And this is where they would make offerings to have a prosperous business. It was also the place after the Chinese temple burnt down, and the Chinese that were left would come here for all their different religious ceremonies throughout the year, and they would pay a fee to do so. And this is what remains of that shrine. It's like a little temple. As you can see, there's a lot of variety of other things that they were selling in here. And all this is probably back to 1940. So anything in here is probably prior to 1941. Because in December of 1940, that is when Langan passed away, and he was the only one that operated the general store. Doc Hay, by that time, was pretty much blind. He did not get a lot into the other businesses outside of his medical practice. And so everything you see in here probably dates prior to 1940. This is the stock room. You can still see lots of crates and boxes back here. We do a little bit of curation of artifacts in this back room that you normally can't see from the back side. But it's just a little bit closer up view of what we have back here. Some of these boxes are still sealed, have not been opened. And so we have no idea what's some of these. In fact, what you see in this whole building is only about half of what the collection is. The other half is in our collections room over at the Interpreter Center. And you can just imagine when they first opened up the buildings that this whole building here was just packed full of different crates and boxes scattered throughout with just enough room just to kind of weave your way through. And so we removed a lot of that so we can actually open it up for tours of folks when they come through the building here. But I thought this might be a unique opportunity to have a little bit closer look at what's here in the stock room that was left. And there's actually a couple little stories. In one of these barrels here, or another barrel similar to this, they actually found during the first round of renovations in the 1970s a half a barrel full of Wai-Hee peanut butter kisses. Well, someone in the 1970s had the smart idea of trying to sample a couple pieces of that. They said they'll never do that again. It actually made them sick for a couple days afterwards. So the moral of the story, don't eat 70-year-old candy. Not good for you. So that is just one of the items that they found back in here as well. Here in the general store, besides all the different items and shrines that you see, if you notice up here on the wall, there are little paper lanterns. These lanterns, the last one dates back to 1915 or 1916, when it was shipped from Hong Kong. But these things are very delicate. One of the things I do as the curator here is once a year I come through and clean all the items and the shelves and the walls of the building because even dust is slightly acidic, so I want to make sure that we keep an eye on that. But doing these little paper lanterns is very, very difficult. Hate doing them because they are so fragile, as you can see here. But that just goes to the point that we want to preserve this for the long term. So everything in here is still in its place since 1948 when Doc Hay left. So, and these lanterns are things that we like to keep very good care of into the future. Where I'm standing is the kitchen area of Kam Wah Chung. This is where Langan and Doc Hay would provide meals to all the new Chinese immigrants when they first arrived into Chinatown. They would fix meals using a very large wok that's right here. They'd also use the pots and pans for Doc Hay's medical formulas to make all his teas. There's brown jugs, Chinese brownware that they shipped a lot of different ingredients in here as well. One unique thing in the kitchen is that if you look here, there's a window, and to the left is a wood cupboard. This cupboard is also known as the icebox, where they kept all the perishable goods in here. Over here, if you look down towards the floor, there is a square that you can see right here. It's a solid piece of hardwood. It extends all the way into the ground. It cannot be moved. One of the things that we do when we have standard tours come through is we have people guess what that might be. Well, in this case, It's actually a chopping block for the wood fire stove. They would actually bring in the wood and chop it right here inside the building, which kind of relates to this hand pump. If you look over here, we got a hand pump that goes through the floor, and we think it was added in the 1880s into the building as well. And the reason why they did this, we think, is because during that time, that's when all the racial tensions was happening during the 1880s and 1890s. And besides being able to bring in fresh water all year long, they were also able to use this building for defense. It was the only building in Chinatown that was not made of wood. By having a hand pump inside the building, they were able to stay inside for several days at a time if need be. One other thing that we would like to point out is here behind the stove is another shrine. That one's Zhao Shen, the kitchen god. They would make offerings to have a prosperous year right there. One note that we get a lot of questions about is that little bandolier that's there on the wall with the bullet in it. It's a 4570 government issue round, and it's the same caliber that was used during the Indian Wars. And I'm not sure the reason why it's here. The speculation is that it could have been either a trade for a service or maybe as a gift. Because, as you may know, the Chinese were not allowed to own firearms during that time period, at least until after 1943. This is the bunk area, and this is where Dak and Ling would provide lodging to all the new Chinese immigrants when they first entered the town. Ling would charge them 5 cents a night per person, 4 people per bed. Yes, you heard me right, 4 people per bed. And they would either sleep with their head to toe, either lengthwise, or just as likely, they probably could have slept perpendicular, so their feet are dangling over the edges, which would actually make a little bit more sense. These are the mattresses that they use. It was just a simple reed mat that they would lay upon. After the Chinese left, Dake would start using these for his patients, because by that time his reputation was being spread across the nation. We have letters coming as far away as South Dakota and Texas and Nevada to be treated by Dake, and they would even occasionally travel that distance to come here to be treated. So he would provide them a place to rest, recuperate if need be. Over here on this side of the bunk area, over here on this side of the bunk area, you see a little bit clearer some of the items that he had back here. We got a lot of questions about the photograph here of this child. We have no information about that whatsoever, but it is of the clothing period back after 1900, about World War One, and we think it might have been someone that was in the Chinese Republican Army or something like that. We're just not sure. Above here on the wall is a photograph. This was actually a gift to Long An by the bank president, and the photograph states, "To Long An of John Day, Oregon, a staunch friend and loyal supporter of the First National Bank of Portland, Oregon." This is the U.S. Bank today. There's a little story behind this, which I got to step back for. In the 1930s, Dake and Long An got together with a rancher by the name of Herman Oliver. They got together and said, "We are not going to pull the money out of the Grant County Bank." This is during the Great Depression. So it was one of the few banks in the region that did not close during that period. Well, we always assumed that Long An received this gift because of the amount of business that he was doing. Long An had at least 7 different banks with numerous bank accounts among them during his time as the businessman of Kam Wah Chung. And we always assumed that he received the reward because of all that money and business that he was doing with the bank. Well, a couple years ago, as we were scanning our archives, I came across a letter from that bank president. In that letter, he said, "Long An, I wish to thank you for loaning us the money to keep the bank open." That is a huge deal, because typically during that time period, which was the 1930s, Chinese did not do a lot of banking, and Long An did. So this is very important because in spite of the Chinese Exclusion Act, they were able to make their fortune, make a lot of money, and to be able to have enough money to loan a bank to keep it open is a huge deal. Not only because they're Chinese, but any individual does not normally have enough money to keep, does not have enough money to loan to a bank to help keep it open. So we thought that was a very significant part of the story here. This is Long An's bedroom, and this room was added on sometime about 1914. When they first opened up the building in the 1960s, it was found with extreme water damage. And so most everything in here has been replaced or reconstructed. The only thing that's still original are the doors, windows, and the electric wiring right here, which is now the tube, and it still works. It's not hooked up to a high voltage power source. It's only hooked up to a 12-volt power system. So it's perfectly safe to be on, and it's still functional. So when the reason why we think Long An added on the room was because by that time he was doing a lot of business, and he did not want to disturb Doc K. Because if you recall, Doc K lived, or his room was at the front of the building, and we don't believe that Long An wanted to disturb Doc K at 3 o'clock in the morning when he was coming home from gambling or business or traveling. And so he added on this room with another doorway. So a couple other key things with Long An is that, as you can see, he really was a businessman in Kam Wah Chung. And as I alluded to earlier, he had land in mining claims throughout Oregon and Washington. He had other businesses that he was either co-partner of or he owned outright. He had numerous properties, including over in Portland and even on the West Coast. And he also was involved with the stock market. He was an astute gambler. He was out gambling all the time. And he owned racehorses. And he would actually name his racehorses after the original owners. He also owned the first car dealership in Eastern Oregon, which we come to find out that in 1926 he won an award for selling the most cars. If you don't know the story, that Long An sold over 100 cars in the city of John Day, which he was written up in a auto magazine of the time, telling how well he did with selling the vehicle. It's called a tourist garage. And he operated that from about 1921 up until the time of his death, and shortly afterwards it was sold to one of his business partners. But there is stories and documentation that what he would do is go get a ride to Portland, and he would drive the new vehicles back here to John Day. And apparently not every vehicle made it here brand new. In fact, we have records to where he would hire kids as young as 13 or 14 to drive the vehicles from Portland here to John Day. And as you can imagine, that probably was not very good on some of the vehicles. Long An also was involved with a lot of other activities here as well. In 1940, he passed away in December at the age of 78. When he passed on, his estate was worth about $93,000 at that point, which in today's money is about $1.7 million. Left everything to Doc Hay. When Doc Hay fell and broke his hip in 1948, like we said, he went on to Portland to be mended. He never returned. And so he passed away in Portland in a nursing home in 1952 at the age of 89. When Doc Hay passed away in 1952, he also wrote out a will, leaving everything to his son. But because the Oregon state law at the time, estate money could not be given over. And so the courts at the time ruled that the estate money had to stay here, and so it was given to Bob Wah. Side story with Bob Wah is he was a nephew of Doc Hay, and he lived in Idaho for a while, And then after Long An's death in 1941-42, Bob Waugh came over to help Doc Kay. And he actually moved into the building for 2 or 3 years to help Doc Kay out. And they kind of remodeled a little bit inside the building here before Doc Kay actually paid for the construction of a house, which is over across the parking lot. And when he moved out, Doc Kay still stayed here inside the building. In 1955, Bob Waugh actually, in an agreement, leased the property of Kam Wah Chung to the city, so it could be kept in protection, with the stipulation it be kept as a museum and testament of the trade of immigrants to the U.S. In 1966, when Bob Waugh passed away, in his will, he left everything to the city of John Day. But if you recall at the beginning of the tour, it said the city was going to tear the building down. That's because they actually forgot they owned the property. And in 1968, when they're going to do all the redeveloping, they rediscovered the documents, and so they looked through it and decided to make a museum because of everything that was in here. A couple unique things to leave you with is that if you notice the outside of the building had 2 floors, the second floor, we'll take a moment to go up in there and check that out. So right now we are in the second floor of the Kam Wah Chung building. As you can see, there's not a lot in here. The reason why we don't allow tours up here into the second floor is because it is unsafe, particularly with the steps and stairs for a lot of people to be walking up here at one time. So the second floor was completed sometime in the 1890s, which corresponds with the completion of the Prairie City Railroad. Everyone thought there was going to be another big mining boom, including Long An. He wanted to add more bunk space. So he went around town, found the house, hoisted it up on top, and here's your second floor. He never did use it for lodging, but he did use it for storage. In fact, most of the documents in the collection came from the second floor right here. There's not a lot going on up here, as you can see, but one of the unique things that I want to point out to you is over here on this side is that you can see a brick fireplace that is a remnant of what used to be down below. And over here on this doorway are different newspaper articles, and some of them are dating back to the 19-teens. So when we tell people there's not a lot going on here in the second floor, now you can see that there really is very little up here in the second floor. And we do use it for storage of extra components, such as the chimney flumes and a couple other things like that. But in general, the second floor is not really used for anything. But it kind of gives you a hint of what it used to look like as a house before it was used for Kam Wah Chung. Now we'll go back downstairs and in the tour in Long An's bedroom. Here in Long An's bedroom, this is the end of the guided tour. There is a lot more to the story than what I had time to reveal here today. So whenever you can, come back out and actually get on the tour. Normally we're open for the season May 1st through October 31st, 7 days a week. And please visit the Oregon State Parks website, and you can actually book a tour in the future online. So keep an eye out for that. If you have any more questions, just give us a call. Our number is at the website of Oregon State Parks or on the webpage at the Friends of Kam Wah Chung Company Museum. Thank you. Have a good day.